Great. So I believe we're now live and recording. So I'll just kick off. Before I introduce our speakers, I'll maybe talk a bit about who I am and who the Dublin Coding School are. So I'm Luke Treacy. I'm the General Manager of the Dublin Coding School. We're a new school in Dublin. We offer courses online, but in time, when it's safe, we're all on lockdown now, but we're hoping when it's safe to have a facility when we can offer courses live as well as online. We're a school for adults who are looking to change their careers or move into the IT or tech space. So we do courses in things like web development, software testing, the basics of code. We're developing things like cybersecurity, UX design, but one of our main courses, and the one we're going to be talking about this afternoon or this evening indeed, is data analytics. And that course is really for beginners, so people who maybe haven't got a background in data analytics, have never worked in it before or studied it before. This course gets you up to a beginner level, so you can start applying for entry-level jobs. Also, just to mention the Dublin Coding School, also, we have a career centre. So if you're one of our students and you've booked onto our course, when you finish the course, which is about 2.5 months, you then get automatically enrolled into our career centre, where our guidance counsellors will work with you on your CV, your online presence, but also we help you with interviews and mock interviews. So if you get an interview for a job, for instance, we'll coach you a day or two before on how to prepare for that company and to anticipate questions you might get. And the final thing the Career Centre does is partners with hiring companies who are looking for people in the roles of our courses. And our partners tip us off when they've got roles and we share your CVs with them. So that's a bit of background on what we do. Oh, I should also mention all of our courses. Once you book on once, you get a second chance to do it within 12 months because, if something hasn't sunk in, we give you that second chance. I should just mention that. But with no further ado now, I'll get to the topic at hand. So this is introducing our data analytics faculty. So we have 3 lecturers in the data analytics team. And I'd like to just maybe first hand over to Ray. Ray is one of our lecturers here. Just hand over to Ray maybe to introduce himself, tell us a bit about himself and how he got into data analytics. Ray.
Thanks, Luke. Hi, everyone. I have worked as a data analyst at Wayfair, which is a global e-commerce company, for approximately 4.5 years. So I've worked in the same company from the very beginning as the lowest level junior analyst to quite a senior data analyst role. So I know what it's like going in there, not being necessarily confident in your abilities or knowing quite what to expect. And then within that role, gaining the confidence and gaining the skills and knowing what it takes to progress and be successful. So I'm very much looking forward to sharing that knowledge with you all and catching up with you at a later date.
Great. Thank you very much, Ray. So we'll just come over now to Daniel, who's there. If you'd like to just introduce yourself and a bit of your background, where you work and have worked, and how you got into data analytics, Daniel.
Sure. Thanks, Luke, and thanks, Ray, for the wonderful introduction. So as you all know, my name is Daniel. So at the moment, I'm working as a data analyst with TikTok, but then I've obviously worked in a few other companies as well in the past. But just to give you a little bit more context as to what brought me to data and all my experience across the road. So to be honest, I'm not from a engineering or a data background. To be honest, I'm more from a commerce background, and I started my career from a non-technical aspect, where I started my career as a business analyst, kind of helping different. I was working in a consulting company, obviously helping different companies with their business requirements, stuff like that. But then obviously during the course, as we all know, that data has grown a lot in today's world, and it's really lovely what data can do in terms of transforming businesses, management, and etc. So I think that's one of the key things that brought me into the data space. And obviously soon after that, I started learning more about it and trying really hard to get into the space. So just to give you guys an understanding that obviously it's a wonderful space that you can explore And as Ray said, that we are really, really happy and excited to share our experience as well with you guys whenever we can.
Great, thank you very much, Daniel. Some really interesting companies there between Facebook and TikTok, and I know we spoke before about your experiences at KPMG, where you got a really broad range of experiences. So that's great. We might get to that a bit later. Johns, I'll just hand over to Johns, who's Johns George, who's our third lecturer here. Maybe just to introduce yourself and your background and how you got into data analytics. You're at Bank of Ireland, I believe.
Yeah. So my name is Johns, and been working as a senior data analyst in the Bank of Ireland for past 2.5 years now. I started as a normal data analyst, then I got promoted as a senior. Then, like, my background will be like I had a computer science bachelor's from DIT, now TUD. So, like, even though I had a basic idea of what data analyst is or data analyst does, but before joining my bachelor's degree, I didn't have a fair bit of idea. So during the course you do like a very wide variety of modules, mostly focused on the software development itself. But 20 or 30% will be based on the data. So while I was doing that, I was not sure like what I want to do. Like on my third year, I did the internship actually. On the internship, it was actually software engineering. So I was not sure if this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I took like a year off from the college and joined a startup company, Uni People. So one good thing about joining a startup company is you can do a variety of jobs. I was a project manager, I was a software developer, I was a data analyst, I was a tester, everything. So one thing I constantly loved doing was a job of a data analyst. So I said, okay, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So then I went back to college, finished my degree focusing on the data modules. Then I got after completing my college, I applied for BOI, and they accepted me and offered me a job of a data analyst. I've been working in the company for the past 2.5 years. A couple of months ago, I was promoted as senior data analyst, and yeah, and more or less it's, what Ray and Daniel has said. It could be scary going into the data analyst job if you're not too sure or not too technical. But I have seen variety of people who has come into from like commerce or other degrees, engineering, or like wide variety of history even. So it's not like if you're passionate about what you want to do, or if you're willing to put it, like it's not like you do a degree and stop learning. It's a constant self-learning thing. Like any other IT jobs, you have to the technology will keep on changing a lot in the coming years. So as any developer, you have to keep on learning. So it's just if you're passionate about it, it's not, you don't need to worry about anything else.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Johns. So I'll get to sort of the first question we were going to pose today. So I'm sure there might be a lot of people maybe watching this now who are working in non-technical fields. Maybe they've worked in hospitality, maybe retail. I know we even spoke to someone in the Career Centre today or yesterday who's a beautician and is thinking of coming into this role as well. So they'll be looking at this and thinking, what am I getting myself in? What am I getting myself into? What exactly does a data analyst do? So I mean, I'd like to put it to you guys on the panel. Just maybe to describe. As if to someone who is a complete beginner who doesn't know what a data analyst does, what a data analyst actually does. Who'd like to maybe have a go at that first?
I can answer that.
Yeah, great. Yep.
Sure. So in a nutshell, what a data analyst does is makes use of the data that a company has available to them and puts that data together in a way that essentially offers insights, which will inform the decision making that the management or leadership makes. That's about as simply as it can be put. Now, obviously, when you get into the mechanics of it, typically it might look like you using some tools like SQL to go into your company's databases, pulling the data that you need, wrangling that data, wrangling being a term of kind of fiddling about with it to make it more useful, and filtering it on what you need to see, extracting that data, and then putting that data together either on some sort of spreadsheet like Excel or Google Sheets or some other software, and kind of making some basic statistical analysis in line with the business problem that you want to resolve. And then finally, once you've got that, it's about communicating that to the stakeholder, the business stakeholder, communicating your findings in a way that's, if the problem itself or the analysis you made is very technical, making sure that it's clear and actionable for people without the same technical background.
Who, just to expand on that, so when people are listening, what do you mean by like who the stakeholder is? So they're people working in other departments, aren't they?
Exactly. So you aren't the one who decides what data analytics to perform. Typically, it's in line with what the business wants, and your stakeholder is the person who's depending on you to deliver the insights to them, to help them make a decision. And that really, there is no set person. You may only have a single stakeholder, or you may have multiple stakeholders, or your stakeholders may change over time. Their level of seniority might change. I mean, it might be a colleague or a peer. It might be your direct manager. It might even be the company's COO or CEO, depending on the size of the company and the task involved in your level of seniority. So yeah, essentially the stakeholder is the person you're delivering your analysis to.
Right. So it could be someone like the marketing manager who says, I want to know about all the customers who spent over €5,000 last month. Or it could be the finance manager saying, I need to know all the people who are late paying their bills by 2 weeks and I need it in half an hour. Is that the type of thing?
Exactly that, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And does anyone else want to answer that question really about what the role of a data analyst is from your perspective?
I can give it a go, Luke.
Yeah.
So let's simplest form, like very similar to what Ray has said. A simple use case I can give is like, say for instance, a lot has changed in the COVID era. So similar to what stakeholder or like a senior, another team or department might come in a banking sector, for example, they might come to data analysts and say, will it be possible to bring in all, do analysis on what, like these days everybody use contactless payment because no one want to deal with cash. So what was a contactless payment overall in debit card side before COVID happened, like maybe March of 2018 compared to what March of this 2021 is like. So that will make a huge difference. Like on March 2018, it could be like a very few population. Still like maybe 50% was using it. Now it'll be more like 80 or 90%. So these kind of data will make use of very senior management level what they want to do with this. They want to focus maybe on improving the mobile application and making it way more useful for the customers ideally. So these kind of the products or like a business use cases will be developed by the management, and they will ask data analyst to analyze the data, these kind of contactless payment, and reporting it back to them. It depends on the ask itself. If you want to automate it, if you want to see monthly by monthly, like what monthly views, like we can do on something like Tableau, where we can visualize it in a very ideal way. We can provide insights to it, or if it's just one-time ask, we can then provide it in plain pure numbers, like a pure just an email. This was a number last year. This is a number this year, or it can be very like an Excel file. It all depends on what the business asks itself. But in a very simplest form, this is what I can explain you. Or even in a social media side of it, maybe Ray can watch for how Facebook or TikTok is. That might be very ideal example for like a people who use it in day to day.
Yeah. Well, we can get to that. By the way, you just mentioned some of the technologies there. So I think maybe we'll stop for a second and maybe explain briefly what each of those are. So you mentioned SQL, and then you mentioned Tableau, but I think Python is another one that's on the course. So does someone really want to tell me first? Because I know a lot of people watching will think, I've read the course profile, I've looked at this, I don't understand what SQL is. Python, I thought that was a snake. I don't know what that is. So So it might be good maybe just so we could briefly explain what these things are and how they fit into what a data analyst does. So does someone maybe want to, first off, I'll talk about the three, because I know that they kind of go in order, don't they? So maybe we'll start off, could someone explain what SQL is or SQL? Who would like to put that?
Yep. Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, look. So yeah, just to give you to give the audience a brief understanding of the tools that specifically used in data analytics roles, and moreover also data scientist role is basically three major. So obviously there are much more, but then three major I would say foundation tools or tools that we use or technologies that we use. One is SQL, obviously, and then would be Python, and then would be any kind of a visualization tool. For instance, let's say Tableau or Power BI, which are the basic main top players in the visualization tool areas. So now coming back,
we'll just go to SQL at the moment. So maybe just explain, because I think there's going to be people watching who really don't know what these things do. So let's just maybe explain SQL first without mentioning the others, because in case people get confused.
Okay, sure. That sounds all right. Look, yeah. So yeah, just focusing on SQL then. So SQL is basically a language that is more simplest a way to talk into a database. Like what I mean by that, imagine that today you travel from country A to country B, and which obviously they're speaking with a different language. So obviously you would have to learn the language to communicate with them. So in other words, so imagine that if you are in the world of databases, so databases are basically, let's say it's a room full of different cabinets and a room full of files. So in other words, in the olden days, obviously you can just go to the file cabinet and pick up your spreadsheet from a file itself, and then you can analyze it. But obviously in the era of cloud, where we all obviously put all our data in the cloud, in form of data tables and obviously databases. So there's obviously a way to communicate with it. So that is where SQL comes into the picture. So basically SQL is the language that we use to basically communicate and pull the data, make changes to the table, and also to get information and extract those tables out of the database.
Great. Well, that's. I hope. Thank you very much for explaining that. So really, SQL is like, if you imagine, are you kind of saying if a database is like a big filing cabinet, and SQL is sort of a way of getting in there and finding those files? Is that right? I remember one of you described it like that to me before. So SQL gets the data out of the database for you. So once you've got that out, what do you use then? Would you use, is that where Python comes in? Maybe someone wants to tell me how that works. Maybe Ray, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Python can be used for that purpose as well. Typically, Python is a more advanced tool, and it's not always used. It wouldn't be ubiquitous in the data analytics role like SQL would be, or Tableau even. It's generally reserved for more specific use cases, but in a data analytics world, yeah, exactly. It's for manipulating the data that you've already extracted. And kind of, there's certain things you can do in SQL too. As you're pulling your data from your databases, you can manipulate that data and filter it to get what you want and see it the way you want to see it. However, Python in some cases offers more of that, and it's more flexible. Furthermore, Python is actually a real programming language, meaning that it's not just for data analytics. Its capabilities are vast. You can pretty much do anything you want with it. So you could also use Python to build dashboards. You can use Python for more advanced data science topics like predictive analytics or machine learning. So Python really is at the more senior level of the data analytics role, where what you can do with it is really, the answer to that is whatever you want. And it's extremely flexible and extremely powerful. In many other cases, for more junior roles, if you need to manipulate your data, you can do that, like I said, in SQL directly. Or if it's easier, you can always at first take your data from SQL and perhaps manipulate it in a spreadsheet like Excel or Sheets, or even in Tableau itself or some other visualization
You mentioned
software.
Tableau there. So you mentioned Tableau, which is obviously one of the technologies along with SQL on the course. So maybe you should let them know exactly what Tableau is.
Sure. So
Yep.
a core part of the analytics role is visualizing data. So as I'm sure most of you know, when you think of data analytics, I'm sure some of you think of charts and visualizations, line graphs, bar graphs, and so on. And that's a core aspect of the data analytics role, is being able to communicate data. And a lot of times the best way to communicate data is to communicate it visually. So a keen sense of how to do that well is very important. Tableau is really kind of, it's not the only tool, but it's the most widely used tool for visualizing data, especially when it comes to building reporting that's interactive. So instead of, just generating a chart that you might want to put on a slide for a deck, if you want to actually generate an interactive report that has drop-down menus and filters that will adjust the visualization or the numbers you're seeing, that's where Tableau comes in. And essentially what you do is you connect the data that you've extracted to Tableau, and then you manipulate the data in Tableau and create a visualization for it. And that gets published onto something very close to a website. So it's actually a URL then that gets sent out to people who want to look at your report, meaning that you can control if you need to make changes to it. You can make changes from your version that's on your PC and then push that out. So everybody's version updates simultaneously, as opposed to creating a report for somebody on Excel. And that person has one copy on their Excel, and then you've sent out an updated copy, but they're still looking at the old copy, which is a bit of an antiquated approach. So that's why we use Tableau.
You don't have to keep sending your corrections or updates. It updates itself to whoever.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Listen, by the way, I was just going to mention to everybody watching, if you have questions, we're going to take a few at the end. If you just type them into the bottom of the feed, and we'll get to some of them at the end. And we've got some of the Dublin Coding School team who you can't see are looking at these questions and feeding them live to me at the end. So if you do have questions, get them in there. Now, the next topic I just wanted to cover was, I know from talking to you guys offline, you've said that there's more to the data analytics role than just technical skills, and that a lot of communication skills, sort of communications, but also sort of business nous and being able to see outside of the box. Some of these other skills, softer skills, come into it. Is that the case? Who'd like to maybe start on that, about the communication side of this?
Yeah, I will provide that. So one of the key things in the data analyst role is like the big soft skills. Like I would say at least 20-30% of the job, I would say you have to keep on communicating with the stakeholders, other members of the team, fellow data analyst. So say, for instance, once a project comes to you, you have to be on a constant meetings, like probably every day, a couple of times a day, actually, meeting up with the stakeholders, understanding the problem itself. And they might stay, like it'll, for even if I go back to the same example, like if they might only come and say, I want to see the full contactless transaction and what happened, where it happened. So that could be what the ask itself is. So we might have to go to the meeting and get as much as knowledge as possible in terms of this problem. So, and then we actually go to this, analyze the data, visualize it in Tableau. And then, once we have to keep them saying, if this is what you're looking for, and they might say, okay, we want this extra thing. And we have to keep on communicating back and forth, the emails, talking to them, it's like constant back and forth. So it's not like, I would say like good 60% would be like our 60 or 70% would be technical skills, and rest like 30% will be soft skills, communicating, creating cool PowerPoints. It's not like simple things we might have done in college, like an Excel bullet point. You have to make it a bit more visually appealing, even in terms of the PowerPoints. And make it presentable, and even email is not like just one sentence email. You have to be much elaborate and much explanatory, like whatever you can explain to them, and making sure everybody's on the team. It's not like a last day of the presentation, you tell, okay, is this what you want? You have to be, constant, talking to the stakeholders. So it's like a simplest version I can put it, of what extra things you need to know.
Okay, would anyone else like to talk about that on communications and Daniel?
Yeah, sure, Luke. So I just want to mention a few points here, and I'm giving this point obviously based on my experience and also hiring for my team during my tenure with Facebook and obviously now with TikTok. Is that one misconception that all the people that are actually going to data analytics role is that they take a lot of effort and time, which is obviously important to increase their skill on coding and with all the tools obviously that we mentioned today. But one of the key things that the companies today in the 21st century also look out for is soft skills. So specifically when I'm talking about soft skills, I'm talking about a few aspects such as critical thinking and problem solving. So and also somebody who can actually tell a story. So I'm just going to real quick on a brief just explain to you what I mean by these 3 points. So in other words, critical thinking is some of the questions that you would be asked during an interview for companies like Facebook or TikTok or any kind of social media companies and that, because they are very, very keen because these companies are very fast moving companies. So obviously everything is changing with obviously as the social media transform from one day to the other. Obviously our systems also change. So obviously you have to think critically and move on really, really fast. So that's one of the key things from a SOP aspect that is important. The other thing is obviously problem solving. So problem solving is one important because as a data analyst and in such a big company, you are thrown into a lot of different dumbbells, I would say, like a lot of things is thrown at you. So what I mean is like you will be bombarded with a lot of tasks, a lot of multitasking. So that's when you have to have the skill where you can prioritize things, you can solve 2 things together and things like that. The last thing that I wanted to mention was somebody who can actually tell a story. And I think this is one of the key, the most important thing from a soft skill perspective is somebody who can tell a story. So what I mean by this is somebody who can actually tell what the business needs. So to tell a story about your business, about the company that you work, first thing is that you have to know the head and tail of your business. So as a data analyst, if you are going into for example, into Facebook, in a particular area of work in Facebook, if you want to make an impact, if you want to make a change to the work that is happening and make an impact to the team, first and foremost thing is that you need to know the business from top to bottom. So unless you don't know the business, you wouldn't be able to actually tell the story and use your analytical skill to actually perform well. So these are the things that I would say is as important as technical skill as well, if not more. So this is my suggestion, that obviously focus on your technical skill, but obviously your soft skills are also as important as technical.
Well, I think that's a lovely point about storytelling, because it is really storytelling, isn't it? Someone's come to you and asked you for something to report back, and you've got to extract the raw data and really report back in a story form. What is this telling us? Was it you? I remember, Daniel, you told me about having insights, and I think you used the analogy of, was it selling oranges and apples and which was selling more? Do you remember that story?
Yeah. Yep.
Maybe you should tell them that one. That was a good one to sort of highlight how a data analyst can actually can provide insights as well as being told to bring them.
Yeah, sure. Why not? Look, I think that's a good example that we actually spoke about. So imagine, just to give you an example, like imagine you are a data analyst and you're working for a company that sells vegetables or fruits. So imagine that your manager, or let's say your manager in work, wants to know what is the top selling fruits in our shop. So obviously you go and pull the data and you see that apples were sold more than oranges. And then obviously you go and report this to your manager, and your manager then takes a decision based on the insight and say, like, because apples are the most sold product, we should try and give some discounts, advertise it, and maybe increase it. Or we can do vice versa, where oranges are not selling, so we can then advertise or give discount on that. So this is one part of analytics, which is obviously right. This is what we want. But then the second point is telling a story. Now, obviously, the goal of your company is to increase profitability, so increase the revenue. Now, if you want to dig into the data and you actually know the business, you know your data, then what you're going to do is you're going to dig inside more and think about another way. So another example for this, imagine if you're doing an analysis and you want to see, yes, from in this year, that obviously apples did sold more, and they obviously 90% of the revenue. But then we are seeing another story here. When you do analysis, you see that the year-over-year growth of Apple from last year is 10%, but the year-over-year growth of oranges is 50 or 60%. So you can see there's a market trend there. That means although Apple are being sold more in terms of number, but there's been a shift. From last year, we have seen that there's a growth of 50% of people buying oranges. So that means that in the trend, like more years to come, obviously the oranges are going to be sold more because that's the dynamic change in the market. So that's where this is what I mean by telling a story, where you need to understand the business first and then dig
a bit deeper. And yeah, I thought that was a really good example. So it wasn't just, so actually the data analyst could see that and actually say, well, that is your biggest seller, but actually your growth product is this one. And you really need to focus on that because they can see the dynamic change. Well, that's really interesting. Ray, do you have any point on communication and those soft skills being important to a data analyst?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would argue it's equally as important as the technical acumen, because at the end of the day, if you can't communicate the message, then the work doesn't really hold the value, despite on how well you may have performed it on your end. So I would argue that it's a vital aspect. Now, for people joining this course, I think they actually might be at an advantage for this, because presumably a lot of them will have come from a more business background rather than a technical background. So you'll have that kind of step up already. And it's more about keeping it at the forefront of your mind as you're doing your work as an analyst, because that part doesn't drop away. It's about understanding the ask, minimizing ambiguity. So when you're actually working on your task, you're certain that you haven't got your wires crossed and you actually might deliver something that they didn't intend for you to deliver. It's about managing the scope of the project or work and making sure that that timelines and expectations are managed for your stakeholder. And yeah, as Daniel alluded to, it's about being really able to bring the insights to the next level instead of just, speaking to numbers that may not hold any meaning to the audience, being able to put those numbers into context for the business and what it actually means. And it's good to ask a lot of questions, is my experience. If I was to offer a bit of advice around the communications, it would be ask a lot of questions. Typically, when somebody asks you for some analytics, they think they already know the answer, and oftentimes they do. But sometimes by asking a few probing questions, you can kind of get underneath the surface and just discover what the real business case is and offer tremendous value. To give you an example, if I were to use Daniel's example there, really what the question was what potential, what fruit is offering us potential to our business? What should we focus on? But the way it was phrased was, what are the numbers? Now, you could just have gone and delivered those numbers and you would have done your job as per the request. But to be really good as a data analyst, you need to understand why they're asking for those numbers. So having understood that the reason they want to know what those numbers are is so they know which one is the growth product, well, then you can frame your analysis and deliver it that way. So that's an example of why communication is so vital.
Great. Well, look, we've only got a couple of questions from me left to go, and then we're going to open it up to the world at large, all the public who are watching on Facebook. But this one is really just, if anyone would like to offer just a story from the front line, a case study, or a moment in your job in the companies, or even a past company where a stakeholder, whoever that might have been, walked into your office and said, this is what I need. So just really to give a real world example of a data analytics task that was carried out. So I'll throw that out there. Whoever would like to answer that first, you can all have a go if you want. Anyone?
I'm trying to think of a good one.
Yeah.
Sure. So I can give you an example from a couple of years back. We wanted to, well, I say we, the leadership team director level wanted to understand where there was opportunity to standardize processes in our call center and our customer service call center, so that as the company scaled and grew, we made sure that we were being cost effective in doing so. So in other words, eliminating wasteful processes and creating standardization where possible. Now, that's a big problem statement. So the way you really frame that is with analytics. And I worked to do that by getting all of the data that from our workforce management team, who kind of schedule the, I suppose, the schedules of the frontline staff, what times they're working, what times they go on lunch, when they have meetings, when they go home, so on and so forth, when they're out sick. And also reconcile that with our Cisco data, and Cisco being our phone software data. So we could understand when people are actually speaking with customers, and how much of those calls is the customer put on hold? How often is the phone not ringing and somebody's just sitting at their desk waiting for work to come in? And by merging those two data sets together and breaking it out in a waterfall visualization, which I won't go into, but essentially it's kind of like a way of stacking up all of this time and understanding where it's going. We discovered loads of areas where we could put in standard operating procedure, where there was a lot of variance between teams and locations for call centers. To give you an example, there was a lot of variation in the amount of time that certain call centers and certain teams are spending in meetings, without all that much of a difference in the performance, which to us showed that although these meetings probably aren't all that much value add, meaning that we should understand what the minimum quantity should be and then standardize that across all teams and sites, with the end goal of, like I said, making sure that we're being cost effective as we scale. So that's probably a bit of a more senior analytics problem, but that's kind of that was an interesting one, I think.
Yep, very good one. Obviously, our course, for those of you listening, will train you up to being entry level, and then afterwards we'll be our career center looking to get you into entry level roles and internships. So, guys, do we have any other case studies from you guys, or do you want to move on? A story from your.
Yeah, I will give it a go, Luke.
Yeah.
So one of the use cases, or like a previous project that my team was involved in, was understanding like a spend of the customer. So everybody here might have like a fintech application, mobile applications that you can see, how much you spend on accommodation, groceries, all this. So, bank want to see like overall in an aggregate level what our customers are spending on, accommodation, groceries, or like entertainment in each sector, what the spend was like, and they want to see like before and after COVID, So these kind of things will make very useful for the management. So in making a long-term plan, because everything bank does or like a financial institution does is, focused on the customer. So they want to make sure is as happy as possible. So there's always room for improvement. So they want that could be like an idea, like they want to see like at what point of a time like groceries sales is going up, and maybe in which level, which county, like maybe at one point of time Galway, like pubs and restaurants is going up really high. Maybe there was a cultural event going on there at that weekend. So this kind of customer behavior analysis is very much helpful for, like I would say, any company. So that's one of the like a simple use case or project my team has worked on. I can explain.
Really interesting there. And Daniel, I don't know if you have any stories to tell. maybe not intimate ones about Facebook. We don't want to shut down the feed.
Yeah, I was actually trying to think of something that I can actually share, but yeah, because both of the industry in Facebook and TikTok that I work in, obviously, it's very sensitive.
It is. But you know what? That's fine. We can move on to the next question. That's absolutely fine. So the next question is, now we have a lot of people watching this feed who, you know, they're thinking about getting involved as a data analyst, maybe thinking of doing a course or researching it more and all of that. So what advice would you give to somebody who is a complete beginner, who's thinking of joining to be a data analyst? Who'd like to have a go at that first?
I can take a shot at that.
And sorry, just before you go, and also just to frame it, that a lot of people who come in our courses are changing their careers. So maybe they've had 1 or 2 jobs already. I know maybe they work in hospitality. They could be an electrician or a barman, or they could be working in sales, or it could be anything, but maybe they've had 2 or 3 jobs and they think, you know, maybe I'll switch over to being a data analyst. So what kind of advice would you give them as sort of before in that journey?
Sure. Well, I suppose my number 1 bit of advice we've already covered, and that was going to be make sure you don't neglect your communication skills. So though that's still important, we've already spoken about it. So I'll think of another one, which I think is very important, and that is to own your own development. There's no real standard for what sort of training you're going to get, depending on which company you're in. Certain companies might be very mature and very large, and they might have a very thorough process when you're hired in on the tools and techniques that they use, so that you're going to hit the ground running. In other cases, not the case. And you kind of have to evaluate where you are performance-wise and where you need to be to offer optimal value. And often cases, you know, your manager may not be technical. They might be a business manager, especially if it's a smaller company. So it really is on you to kind of evaluate where you can be, you know, offering value and taking that time to train yourself and to practice outside of business hours if need be. Luckily, there's lots of resources and quite excellent value too. You know, things like Coursera and Udemy, and of course, like ourselves. But in certain cases, yeah, don't be shy about owning your own development, especially when it comes to technical skills. And it might be part of the job where you have to put in that extra bit of work, at least at first, if you're not quite, you know, if you're not quite there when you begin your new role.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, Ray, before I go to the others, should they be scared of the technology? How hard is it really? Can anyone really come in and learn this stuff?
Of course, yeah, it's not that hard at all, but it takes time and it takes practice. That's the other thing as well, is it's something you can get quite rusty at if you don't practice it. So let's say you take this course and you learn the skills that you need. It's important that even if you're not applying them in your job, that you practice them in your own time too, so that you don't forget, and keep yourself sharp. Stay curious, stay hungry, and yeah, if you've got that mindset and that mentality and that determination, you'll absolutely kill it. That's all you need. The technical skills will come with time and practice.
Yep, I suppose that's what the Dublin Coding School's here for. So guys, you guys, Daniel and Johns, what advice would you give to someone who's thinking about changing their career and getting involved in data analytics? Who'd like to have a go first?
Yeah, look, sure. I'll go in. Yeah. So I don't have anything. I will add something a lot to this. So I think Ray pretty much gave a lot of clear understanding into that. But just thing I would say and encourage people is that, for example, my own example is that I was not from an analytics background. So when I started my career, so I'm somebody obviously who moved from a non-data background to a data background. So obviously, it is not hard. It is obviously doable. The only thing that you need to do is obviously your love for data and the role. So obviously, if you have the love for the role, obviously the skill set and the learning would come obviously hand to hand. So yeah, and then obviously all the things that we mentioned, obviously Ray and George, and I mentioned during this whole course about the skills, both technical and soft. So those are the areas that obviously that you need to work on. But apart from that, to answer your question, obviously it's not hard at all to move to analytics area.
Yeah, so just takes some hard work. And I suppose it's to point out that the jobs market and the world of work seems to be only going one way. I don't see companies using less data in the future, or you know, like every industry is almost adopting some sort of data approach. I know, I'll probably mention at the end, we're actually having an event in a week or two where it's about the property sector and how they're using data, whether it's construction firms, real estate agencies, and prop tech firms, hiring data analysts and managing data. So that's one industry I didn't think you'd see it that much in, but they are as well. But maybe Johns, will come on to you. What advice would you give to the people watching who are maybe thinking about getting involved and, you know, jumping on the course and changing their careers?
I would say I have very few words other than what already been said, but I would say don't be afraid of this, the things. Say even the soft skills. I would say I myself, you're talking to a person who's very much like used to be an introvert person. So it's not like you need to have all the skills. So you need to be passionate and you need to be, you know, willing to overcome these things. So, you know, do as simple as, you know, asking questions, like a simplest one, like, believe me, everybody in the room might have a lot of questions. They will be thinking, like, would I be asking you know, stupid questions? That's why they will be quiet. So
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter. Like even the simplest question, like even starting doing like small presentation, even with 1 or 2 slides, even with your own family, that's doesn't really matter. Like, you know, coming across these fears, that's the biggest thing. I think I will give props to my previous managers and even my current manager, who actually, you know, who very early on with my career understood I was an introvert person, you know, would very much like to, you know, be left alone with a computer. So he recognized that. He helped me train me as like a person I am today. And, you know, and even for the technical side of you, so once you understand the basic concepts, or like what the Dublin Coding School is in, you know, hoping to do, you know, with all the skills. So once you understand the skills, even every one of the developers or any IT developers would say, once you understand the like any senior level, I would say, so like we actually go back to Google to, you know, find even the simplest solution. So once you understand how to solve it, it's not like you have to learn everything by heart. You know, you always you know, ask your, you know, colleague, or, you know, Google something, how do you do this? So it's not like once you finish the course, it's done with it. You always go back to Google or like Coursera courses. You know, it's just like Ray said, it's up to you to develop your career. It's you know, it depends upon you to where you want to see in next 5 years or 10 years. So and also the technologies keep changing. Like maybe next month, all of a sudden there will be like an amazing technology that everybody wants going to use. So you have to put in time, like after your work, you know, spend 2 or 3 hours, you know, trying to learn that. So these kind of things is very important. So once you're passionate, you have to put in work to do these things.
Yeah, very good point. So what you're saying is that it isn't too hard to come in and learn the basics, but and once you do and you get working, it's a continuous journey of learning in the
Exactly.
role. So
Yeah.
really what we're giving you is that start to get into a role, and then moving on. Okay, guys, look, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have a look, and I know some questions have come in from the floor, from the people who are watching. So I'm going to maybe ask just a couple of those before we wrap up for the evening. I know one of them came in, and maybe it's not really about what we covered, but someone has asked, what's the difference between a data analyst and a data scientist? So who'd like to field that one?
You can give that a shot. It's a tricky one because there's no real standard definition for either, but I'll give you a rule of thumb. A data scientist is kind of a more senior and specialized data analyst, whereas a data analyst typically consumes or uses ready to kind of consume business data. I might do a bit of cleaning up and use that to answer business questions. Typically, data scientists will kind of use more advanced techniques. They might create the data, or they might completely transform the data. They'll use mathematics and statistics to generate complex hypotheses, they might employ things like machine learning or predictive analytics or artificial intelligence. So data scientist is, yeah, in a nutshell, it's a more math and stat heavy data analyst with more involvement in computer science. It's sort of, I wouldn't say that you can jump straight into being a data scientist without starting out as a data analyst, or at the very least, a data engineer or a programmer. So yeah, a data scientist is actually quite a nice career aspiration to have if you're in the field of analytics. But yeah, you would need to, it's more of an expert level or a very senior level analyst, I would say.
Okay, so you'd need to start out as a data analyst first.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we have a couple more here. One of them is maybe a simple one. They're asking, when you're in the role of a data analyst, and you mentioned these projects you work on where, you know, the stakeholder comes in and says, this is what I need, and you go and get it. How many of those a month would you work on average? Maybe we'll just go across maybe to Daniel first. How many of those mini projects would you work on in a month?
To answer your question, Luke, also it's a good question, by the way. So
from Miss Fontes online, who's watching the Facebook feed.
Thanks, you guys, for asking this question. So yeah, to answer your question, I would say it totally depends on two factors. Obviously, one thing is what's your level or what's your level in the company. Are you a junior data analyst or a mid-senior guy or a senior guy? That's one thing that is important. The second thing is what's the nature of the project. So obviously there are some projects that are more complex than the other. So that gives you a different dimension altogether. But then to answer your question, I would say on an average, I would say 2 projects or 2 to 3 projects is something that you would work on a month.
Okay, and Johns, so 2 to 3 for you, Daniel. How many would you be working on, Johns?
It depends solely on project. So there could be projects that business might come at the very last minute and ask for, okay, this needs to be reported to the regulatory body that we need to be as soon as possible. That we might have to work extra time, overtime, like 9 to 9 kind of job. It might be they might come in Monday and they will ask for need to be done by Friday. So there could be something we plan for like 3 or 4 months. So it solely depends on projects. But I would go with what Daniel has said. It could be like if you want to really put a number of projects into it, I would say like a 2 to 3 will be like an ideal one.
Okay, and Ray, just quickly, because I'll move on to another question after that, which is.
Yeah, sure. I mean, how long's a piece of string, I suppose.
Yeah.
There really is no answer to that. It depends on how big the project is. So typically what I would say is the larger projects are composed of several smaller actionable subtasks. And on average, for a piece of work that would be going into one of these larger projects, it's typically a day or 2, sometimes half a day. But the projects themselves, depending on how much goes into it and the scale of the project, can range from anywhere between a couple of days to, you know, a couple of business quarters, 6 months. So it really depends.
Yeah. Okay. And then we've had a question here from Stephen, and well, maybe I can probably answer this one. He's asking about how do you get internships and how do you get into the roles? Well, obviously you can apply yourselves, but how the Dublin Coding School can help you, Stephen, who's watching, is in our career center, we partner with hiring companies who let us know when they have internship programs, but also entry-level roles. And they agree to look at the CVs of our graduates when we propose them. We can't guarantee they'll call you, but we can get your CV out there to them. Now, we target companies who take on interns, and actually, I won't say the company involved or the people involved, but I know that even this week I had a candidate in the career center who was just in data analytics, and they have an interview this week actually with one of our partners for a month-long internship. So that's something that's going on all the time, and we place people in companies, and that's what we look to do. So we're really a two-pronged attack to this as a company. We have the school where we train people in these areas, and then we have the career center where we help you get ready and get into the world of work by helping you with your CVs, your interview techniques, and then trying to place you as an intern or an entry-level executive. And that's really the level we're training people for here. So we're not training you to be intermediate or advanced. that's what the lecturers are, but they're training you into entry-level roles. I'll just take this opportunity to say, anyone who's watching this, you can have a free consultation with us, career consultation, where we can talk about, getting into the world of tech, whether it's data analytics or any of the other areas, and matching it with your background. You can go to our website, which is dublincoding.ie, and you can register there, or you can email me directly. My name's Luke Treacy, and my email is luke@dublincoding.ie. So that would be for a consultation. Also, the data analytics course, you can find that on our website as well. You can register for that and your interests, and that's where you have our lovely group of lecturers here who you've just met, who'll be leading these courses. Just to say, we put together groups of 12 people, so the classes aren't too large. Once we have a group of 12, they get assigned to a lecturer, and they move, and then the next group goes. So we keep the group small for communication and to make sure every question gets answered. So that's really a bit about that. And lastly, we do offer individual courses as well. So you can also book to take your course by yourself, just with a tutor as well, and not be part of a group. So there's the options there. So that really wraps it up. I'm just going to check one last time to see if any last minute questions have come through from the cyber web. No, so that's really just about it for the questions. I don't know if anyone has any final thoughts or final words, or if not, we can probably say good evening.
Really, I would just add, don't be shy and don't be nervous if it's not in your wheelhouse, or if you never thought it was in your wheelhouse. I felt the same way. I don't academically come from an analytics or IT background at all. I just noticed on the job that I had an aptitude for it, and that from that I had a passion for it. That's all it takes, really. So if you're determined enough and interested enough to be watching this, then have confidence in yourself that you'll get there technically too, and that's what we're here for.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, guys, thanks very much for that, and we'll say good evening and goodbye to everyone who's watching on Facebook. Thank you for watching and tuning in. I'd also like to say thank you for my lecturers, and also thank you for the team who've been helping send through all the questions. Okay, good night, good evening, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, bye everybody. Thank you.
Yep.